What's something you two have both seen Mark do well as a senior pastor with respect to associate pastors? And the goal of your answer is not just to praise Mark, it's to instruct other senior pastors to say, hey, guys, do what Mark did. It was so helpful to me as an associate pastor.
The humility of receiving criticism and cultivating an environment where you can have an honest conversation with the senior pastor and not be scared that you'll be fired. If you bring up hard things, including their sin. And the ability to go everything from like, hey, that's not the best way to handle this staff member, to this is the sin that you have to deal with.
Because you've had those conversations with Mark.
Yeah, I mean, all across the board, to even the place of being able to disagree with him on a staff level and say, I need to then take this to the elders and not have any retribution for that.
Yeah. What would you say be some of the top sins of Mark's you've pointed out?
We can talk about that in private.
We don't have enough time.
Yeah. I'm sure there are plenty of listeners who want to know, but we're going to talk about that in private.
I would agree with what Deepak said. I think I would also just add a really generous and open-handed posture toward staff having the potential desires to serve elsewhere. You know, so having an utterly open-handed, utterly generous, even, there's a season where a number of us were kind of like trying to take off in various ways. And Jonathan Kiesling, who's now pastoring in Lafayette, Indiana at Kossuth Street, Jonathan and I both, we kind of had like things that were in process, but not a given. And Mark just assured us, like, guys, if this falls through, like, even though we have to plan budget and stuff like that, like, if this falls through, like, you're still here. We're not getting rid of your jobs. Like, we'll work it out. We'll figure it out. So even as we were like halfway out the door, he was kind of reassuring us. And I think that's just it speaks to his open-handedness, his generosity, and that he's caring about the person. It's not like, oh, you are now off the program, and so you're just kind of dead to us and you need to move on. It's, he's thinking, well, what happens if Kossuth doesn't call Jonathan? What happens if Bobby's plant doesn't come together and he kind of pulls back and decides to pursue something else? There's still that kind of commitment to care. That is much more fundamental than than the agenda for the church or what he's kind of planning about how to do staffing after that. So this is just one example of Mark and his kind of he has a very principled refusal to kind of lean on personal loyalty or play the kind of like, what about the church card? What about me card? He just does not play that card in terms of letting people freely pursue how they think they could use their gifts and what they want to do.
I've seen that commitment to personal care, the second thing, again and again at 9 Marks even, right? Or he and I are talking through some issue and some person. He clearly prioritizes the person. So we were dealing with, say, a 9 Marks contractor and whether or not we'd have the money to forward the contractor and the different things. And I said, what do you think, Mark? And he's like, I talked to him. I said, well, what'd you guys decide? He's like, I know, we didn't really get to any of that. I was just making sure he was okay and checking in on him. And I'm like, that's great and all, but we got to make a decision, But that sort of thing is typical, right? And I see that again and again. Mark Feather, you are a close observer of the CHBC elders and staff. You're around, you're on staff, you're a pastoral assistant. And in addition to being Mark Dever's conciliary on the doctrine of the Trinity, you have many insightful things to say often. What have you observed in the relationship between senior and associate pastors at CHBC? Any interesting observations from you on that dynamic? Nothing may come to mind. Just suddenly I thought he might have seen something.
Yeah, I mean, as is true in the whole of the Christian life, humility blesses everything. And for associates and seniors, it just looks different. So for the associate pastors to take direction from a staff pastor who is above them in the staff hierarchy, but equal to them as an elder, it takes a great deal of humility to do that and to do things maybe that wouldn't be your first priority to do, but you're doing it to advance the ministry that Mark has and the church more broadly. I think for Mark, that humility looks like not only that open-handed generosity, letting these brothers, Bobby's writing academic monographs on his day offs, and Mark is happy to grant those. But also, he's very careful not to mess around with their areas of responsibility. He's going to trust those brothers. He's going to say, hey, the Lord put you here. The congregation trusts you. I'm not going to tell you what to do on all those particulars. So I think those are two different ways humilities have blessed that relationship.
He's a stickler, from what I can tell, for you being at certain things on time. But other than that, he's not a micromanager, is my impression.
I think that's fair to say. Yeah, and it's funny. I was thinking about the scheduling thing because that is one place where Mark is like all the way over on the lever of he sets the schedule. If it's a required meeting, everyone must be there, period. No exceptions unless it's like, an emergency or a family thing or, know. So, and I know some senior pastors who work with other like full-time staff members who are totally open-handed, like not sort of insisting at all that anybody be at anything. And of course, there's limits to that. And as you grow, you have to decide, are we going to have a staff meeting, et cetera. But yeah, Mark is a stickler about if he calls a meeting, whoever's supposed to be there must be there on time, etc. Yeah, and then outside of that, he is very far from micromanaging.